Then thank you very much, Mr. Hodges, Ben Hodges, that you have found time again to participate in my podcast. You are a, former United States Army officer. You were the commanding general of the United States Army in Europe. And yeah, before we start talking about the issues that we specifically want to talk about today, which are the yeah, Hamas attacks on Israel from the 7th of October 2023, so 1 year ago. We should also maybe discuss a bit about the current issues that we have in Israel today, because we see that the war in the Gaza Strip is still going on. There's been recent attacks by Iran launched onto Israel, and also there's an offensive, a military offensive by Israel going on in Lebanon right now to combat the Hezbollah terrorist organization. So, what is your take as a professional army officer on that, and your perspective on how this conflict can be resolved, hopefully soon?
Well, of course, it's a complicated situation because it's Israel fighting on several different fronts. Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Houthis, these are all proxies of Iran. And then the Iranians themselves have attacked Israel directly. Uh, at the same time, is helping its only friend, Russia, in its war against Ukraine. So I see these conflicts as connected, and that we should be approaching them as being connected. If Ukraine defeats Russia, then Russia will be less able to help Iran, and Iran becomes isolated. Therefore, Iran becomes less able to support all of their proxies. If Israel is successful against Iran, then Iran is less able to provide drones and ballistic missiles to Russia. So I think the West should be looking strategically at how can you go after both or support the Ukrainians and Israelis in both theaters and weaken, if not defeat, our adversaries, the Russians and the Iranians. Now, um, the the fact that we're coming up on the 1 year anniversary, or that we're at the 1 year anniversary of the terrible attack on by Hamas, tomorrow is 1 year, um, is um, the reason I'm struggling a little bit because it's not a simple answer. Clearly, Israel has the right to defend itself. Clearly. Uh, and the attack by Hamas on the 7th of October was a devastating attack. I think most people agree it was the worst day of loss of life for Israel since the Holocaust. Um, but the way that the Israeli Defense Force has gone after Hamas, I think, has been done in a way that's excessive use of force has resulted in the loss of thousands of innocent Palestinians. And of course, Hamas builds tunnels and is underneath hospitals and schools and hides amongst the population. We know that. But that does not excuse Israel using the force that they use, which ends up resulting in the loss of life of thousands of innocent Palestinians. So I think also the Israeli continued policies about illegal settlements on the West Bank. All of these things generate or inspire hatred and resistance against the Israeli government. And frankly, it erodes a little bit the support of the West that normally would be behind or helping Israel anyway. Now, Hezbollah is a different situation, I think, because we're talking about a large, well-funded, well-armed terrorist organization that operates in southern Lebanon, that has been killing Israelis for years. And I think the Israeli intelligence services have recovered, if you will, from the shock and also the humiliation of October the 7th. with what they've done to take out in a very targeted way most of the Hezbollah leadership. I mean, from pagers to radios to airstrikes, uh, all the way up to killing Mr. Nasrallah. So um, I don't know how far the Israelis will go there. I don't think they want to get in and occupy southern Lebanon, but they also cannot allow Hezbollah to just to be in there in southern Lebanon and attack Israeli villages in the north of Israel. There's tens of thousands of Israelis are affected by this. So different things, but they're all connected at the end. And I think we should be thinking about this strategically in a connected way.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, this is a good point because you think very like in a differentiated way on this because you say obviously Israel has its right to defend itself and that is obviously the case. This country has been attacked by multiple terrorist organizations on different fronts, as you can say. Even the Houthi rebels in Yemen, for example, are shooting rockets or missiles at Israel and now Iran itself. So this country is under attack. So how do you see how the French president, for example, gave an interview, I think, I don't know if it was yesterday or a short time ago, saying that there shouldn't be, we shouldn't deliver more weapons to Israel, specifically for the war in Gaza. But isn't this a fatal signal right now, as this country is really struggling to defend itself because it is being attacked continuously? And the terrorist organization Hezbollah in Lebanon is so heavily armed that Israel needs every help it can get from its allies. Or what is your take on that?
Well, certainly it's in the strategic interest of the West that Israel remains secure, survives. It's a democratic government in the Middle East. It's not a perfect democracy. The Netanyahu government has a lot of problems and challenges. There's a reason hundreds of thousands of Israelis were protesting against him before October the 7th. So it's kind of in the interest, in a way, of Mr. Netanyahu, whose popularity, by the way, is back up to higher levels. Um, it's in his own interest that Israel is at war because most of the country is unified behind him right now, and these are legitimate threats from these other forces. The problem is the solution that he has chosen against Hamas um, erodes some of that support for Israel. I mean, you've seen the demonstrations in the U.S. and in other places um, in support of Palestinians, not as large and intense as they were a few months ago, but nonetheless, that's there. And I think it's unhelpful that the Netanyahu government has said that there never will be a two-state solution. In fact, he even brags about killing the idea of a two-state solution. And maybe it's impossible to ever get to a full two-state solution, but I think you can't abandon the idea because this war in Gaza is really about land. It's not about religion. It's about land. And finding a way for the millions of Palestinians and the millions of Israelis to live, to coexist there, I think is the only way this is going to ever have a chance to be resolved somehow. Not that it's going to be perfect, it's not going to be wonderful, but in terms of some sort of peaceful coexistence, the Israelis have to respect international law also. Now, I think that the Israelis have called the bluff of Iran. As I've watched Iranian actions here over the past months, I don't think they're as strong or as good as we maybe thought they were. I mean, I think the Israelis have penetrated Iran's leadership rings just as they did Hezbollah. Um, and I think that there are a lot of targets inside Iran that are being considered, whether it's the nuclear program or the Iran's oil producing areas. I suspect that probably 80% or more of the population despises the regime and would be happy to see the Ayatollah and this regime collapse. But that has to happen from within, of course, not something that we do from the outside. But that at some point, this I think this could happen. So the Israelis will be thinking about that. Now, of course, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. The United States has a very important election coming up in just 4 weeks, and there will be interests, let's just say it like that, in the United States they'll be concerned about something happening that affects gas prices in America going into the election, or a war breaks out on a much larger scale that would have influence how people are looking at our election. So these are also considerations that make this a bit of a challenge.
Okay, so that's definitely a factor. So we have elections in the US. So we have political movements also in Europe, which are leaning far right at the moment in many European countries as well. And the results of the elections in the US are unclear so far. Who's going to win? It seems that it's quite close at the moment. So it is still there's still a risk that the political leadership in the US, if it's Donald Trump gets elected, that this will be someone who may be even more unpredictable in the terms of foreign policy, for example. But Iran, as this is the major issue in the Middle East right now, I mean the regime, they are acting, they are attacking Israel directly with missiles and with weapons. And so what do you think, what will Israel do now? Because they said they will retaliate towards the attacks. It is not sure what or how, but the discussions are either that Iranian oil fields will be attacked by Israel, or the nuclear facilities in which Iran probably develops nuclear weapons, or tries to develop the uranium concentration necessary to build nuclear weapons, and that these are possible targets. So what do you think will Israel do, and will Israel also consult the US before doing such a major step? Because the consequences of that could be unpredictable. What will happen after that?
I think that Israel is going to go its own way. That they will probably not share everything that they're thinking about doing with the U.S. because they don't want to be stopped. And also they'll worry about leaks. Now, we know that the commander of U.S. Central Command, General Kurilla, was just in Israel here very recently, talking about this with Israeli leadership. So I would anticipate that the U.S. and probably the UK and a couple of other countries will continue to be there to support Israel if Iran is attacked, particularly in terms of air and missile defense. But I would be guessing when it comes to what Israel might do. The attack on Iranian oil fields, about 90% of the oil that Iran exports goes to China. So what would be the implications for everybody of that? Obviously, that would potentially cause a rise in oil prices. I don't know. I hope that my country and the UK and some others are working with partners in the region to counter or be prepared for that possibility. When you start talking about facilities and processes for helping Iran get a nuclear weapon, this is in a way it's an opportunity. I mean, we've seen that the United States and Germany and some other countries can be blackmailed by Russia just mentioning tactical nuclear weapons. So we've shown that we're vulnerable to that. So imagine if Iran has that capability with a nuclear weapon. that a reluctance to do certain things because Iran might threaten, hey, we have a nuclear weapon, we're going to use it in these different ways. So this is not something we would want them to be able to do. Of course, even if Israel was able to somehow penetrate and destroy some of the Iranian nuclear program, that doesn't mean it couldn't be restarted somewhere somehow. So I don't know how they would do this. They've been pretty successful over the years, taking out some of the people that worked on the program or finding ways to slow it up. I imagine there's a lot of things that they will consider doing. Um, but again, the U.S. will be very interested, as most countries are, in preventing this war from expanding more broadly, but also, candidly, impact on the U.S. election. That I would imagine, I don't know this, but I would imagine that that's part of what the U.S. government is communicating to the Israeli government.
Mm.
4 more weeks.
Okay, okay. To wait a bit, and because I think because your President Biden said that he wants a ceasefire in the region. He wants to the fighting to stop. At least that's what he said. But isn't it also in the right of Israel to retaliate right now because it
Oh,
is surrounded by countries that are attacking it, and if a country, I don't know, would just shoot missiles at Germany for some reason, some other country outside of Europe. I mean, that's basically like what happened in Israel like last week. So, yeah,
yeah.
and how is the West then going to support Israel further? Because even in Germany, we have these discussions about should we support stop supplying weapons to Israel. I don't understand personally this discussion. I don't understand it at all because I think it is completely like in the right of Israel to defend itself, and we should do everything possible for it to be capable of doing that.
Yeah, of course, it's absolutely the right of Israel to defend itself. And just like it's Ukraine's right to defend itself. And we should be helping Ukraine also. What I'm saying is, what does that Israeli response look like? And will it contribute to improve security for Israel and its citizens going forward? It needs to be something that is extremely effective or powerful that would set back Iran's ability for a long time, whether it's leadership, military power, nuclear power, economic power. I mean, there's a variety of things that the Israeli government can and will do, and it needs to be seen as this was Israel that did it. I'm just offering that. I imagine, I don't know, but I imagine that the U.S. government is um, asking for some. Uh, well, I mean, the president said, no, we will not help Israel go after uh, Iran's nuclear program. Or he said that point blank. Now, I don't know what that means. Does that mean like no intelligence, no nothing? Or no, we won't protect you if you go after that? I don't really know. Um, I'm trying to think through what would be the implications here during this election period if Israel went after the nuclear program, and then that created some other massive, much broader response from Iran. The truth is, though, I could be wrong, but Iran did nothing to really help Hezbollah. I mean, nothing. After the Israeli attacks started eliminating leaders with pagers and radios and airstrikes, Hezbollah didn't protect their most important, biggest proxy. They have done nothing really to help Hamas. And I can't see that they're protecting the Houthis either. So maybe Iran is not as good as or strong as we thought they were. I don't know how many more missiles they have. The first attack they did back in April was about 300 something missiles with basically no effect. but that also looked like it was not a serious effort. It was more of a pro forma kind of thing. The attack that happened the other night was much more significant given the types of weapons that were used, and still, very few, they achieved very few meaningful effects. So
Mhm.
maybe they're just not that good.
It is possible that they are not as capable, maybe as people think, and maybe that they are not as protect or as militarily capable. But I mean, they also develop apparently own supersonic missiles. I mean, there was one weapon used apparently in the latest attack, which is yeah, something that is apparently technologically not. I mean, quite advanced actually. That their ballistic missile technology isn't as actually quite advanced, so that they invest a lot of the limited resources that this country has. They put so much into the military development that for the rest of the country and for the people, there's not much left, I think. But also, it is transported that the leader, so the Ali Khamenei, the yeah, religious leader, is also a little bit, let's say, he's not too prone of war. He doesn't really want war. Apparently, he's not really interested in having an open conflict because he's afraid that the system might collapse because
Exactly.
the population. He knows. I think he knows that the population is widely, the majority is against the regime. The majority is not in favor, but they are afraid and they are terrified, and so they don't. I mean, we have seen in the past how protests are being yeah, violently being shut down by the government and by the armed forces there, and so. But what do you think? So how long will this maybe last? I mean, if do you think the regime there has like a 5 year lifespan still, or is this actually maybe a point where it's now maybe starting to crumble and starting to dissolve?
Hmm. Yeah, of course, I don't know what kind of a, how survivable it is. I really thought 2 years ago when you had all the women of Iran were out in the streets protesting, showing their hair and all of these things, I thought, wow, this is really powerful. But then the government, the regime cracked down and brutally, and so that was the time I thought maybe this was going to lead to something, and it didn't. I don't know all the reasons behind it, but it didn't. So I'm reluctant to say that over the next 2 or 3 years it could crack. But I agree with you that, um, like I said earlier, probably 80% of the population or more hates the regime and the oppression and the corruption actually inside the regime. The Israelis obviously will be aware of this, and they'll be thinking about how can they help put some pressure there that might lead to the regime cracking from the inside. Now, another factor to keep in mind in all of this is Syria. I mean, Syria is a Russian ally, but Syria also is the transshipment place where Iran has traditionally delivered ammunition, equipment, weapons, etc. For Hezbollah. It goes through Syria and then down into Lebanon. And I imagine we're going to see increasing strikes by Israel against even Russian airfields that will make it difficult for Iran to deliver aid to Hezbollah through Syria. But so this is another vulnerability, if you will. If you think of the Hezbollah Iran supply chain, there's a vulnerability there. So lots more to see and watch. It's within the context of U.S. politics, Israeli politics, and don't forget there still are 101 hostages that are missing. Certain four from previous time, and then 97 that are still there from October the 7th. Uh, Certainly, some or many of them are probably dead. We don't know that, but that's over 100 hostages still not out there. And but Netanyahu, you don't hear him talking about the hostages as much
Hmm.
anymore. So I don't know what kind of a factor that is.
Yeah, I mean, it is likely that they know maybe that it's quite difficult now a year later to maybe get them back, but maybe it is possible. We don't know, but I think it is also an excuse maybe for Netanyahu to go through with his politics to say, okay, Gaza Strip now is a military operation, and we will do whatever we want in that sector because Israel has the military power there, and they are the largest military factor. So in the end, they are the ones who decide. And I think, as Netanyahu, I think said also that he's not really in favor of a two-state solution. And I think that probably that will lead to Israel being occupying the Gaza Strip for now, or maybe even long term, and will probably, I don't know if they want to start resettlements there of Israeli settlers in that region, or if they want to have the people who are from Palestine continuing to live there under Israeli occupation. But what do you think? Is there any solution to that conflict, or is there a real interest by Israel? There can't be a real interest by Israel to have a two-state solution, at least under the current government. And what I think also is that many people from Israel, like the population, support that they actually are quite they are quite offensive in that sense that they say we want this whole territory to be completely controlled by Israel and not. And it's understandable to not have two countries or two military organizations within these territories that are attacking us constantly with missiles and terrorists like last year. So it's also understandable, right? A bit, I would say.
I don't know. Of course, the Israeli population and the government, they will want to create a situation where they're not going to be constantly under attack from terrorists operating out of Gaza or some other place. So that's going to be part of it. But I don't think that there's a huge interest in having Israeli troops permanently there. I mean, that's expensive. You're a target. They've done that before. They left for that very reason, just like they pulled out of Lebanon before, because it's not sustainable, and it's not always the most effective thing. So I imagine they're looking at ways to create a secure environment. Um, they have a hard time finding any Palestinian leadership that is not corrupt, that would be willing to provide the leadership, or to administer the Gaza from a Palestinian side. You know, maybe one day if there's an agreement and you get external forces come in that would help create something like NATO's I4 did back in 1995 in Bosnia. But you would have to have an agreement to which everybody agreed before you could impose any kind of peacekeeping force from the outside. Now, I just don't see that happening during the Netanyahu time.
Okay, so currently it is probably unlikely that we will see maybe a peaceful solution there. The war is ongoing, but hopefully we will maybe meet again at some point and maybe talk about some better news in the Middle East. Maybe that there will be more cooperation and definitely a democratic solution for all countries bordering also Israel to have not only Israel as the only democracy left there, but that there will be democracy in all other countries as well. But thank you very much, Ben Hodges, for finding the time. Very, very grateful for that. And if you have any last message that you want to give to my listeners about the conflict or anything else you want to mention, you may do so now.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, Jan, that you let me come back on, and I do want to do it again. I think that the U.S. election, I'm anxious. Obviously, I hope that Kamala Harris is elected as our president. If it's a Trump administration again, I worry about democracy in the United States, as well as the uncertainty and the damage to the cohesion of NATO that he has already inflicted once before, and that I would anticipate happening again. He is unpredictable. And I think allies and friends need some certainty when they think about the United States. Um, a Harris administration, I would anticipate when it comes to the Middle East, Uh, it'll be interesting to see who does she bring with her. Her national security advisor, her Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, ambassadors. This will give us signals as to how she plans to what will be American strategy for the Middle East and for our relationship with Israel going forward. Uh, I anticipate that she will be very strong. She will have a very forward-leaning foreign policy that relies on allies and partnerships and respect for international law and respect for international agreements.
Okay, then thank you very much and talk to you very soon.